Today is Monday, May 27th, 2024. We like our stories to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We accept drama, danger, uncertainty, as long as there is resolution by the end. This story by Joe Becker and Adam Sella is not like that. It contains every aspect of the drama, the trauma, the doubt, the loss, and the pain since October 7th. And by the end, I confess, I don't know what to think or say, except that we need to hear this. Dr. Yuval Bitton, in 2004, was running the dental clinic at the Beersheba prison complex, southern Israel. He had been there for 8 years. When he came, he assumed that he'd be treating guards and other employees, but as it turned out, many of his dental patients were some of the most horrific prisoners being held in Israel. Hamas operatives responsible for terrorist attacks, as well as the Israeli who assassinated Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. There were times when Dr. Bitton would be drilling the teeth of one terrorist only to learn that outside the prison walls another had struck. During the day, he said, you would treat them, and at night you would come home and cry. He said he tried to compartmentalize. He told himself that as a doctor he was bound by his oath to do no harm. And on particularly bad days, he said, he reminded himself of the famous words of David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, who said, the state of Israel will be judged not by its wealth, nor by its army, nor by its technology, but by its moral character and human values. One prisoner in this prison since 1989 was Yahya Sinwar. At the time that he was imprisoned, he was 27. He had been convicted of brutally killing 4 Palestinians that Hamas suspected of collaborating with Israel. Now, Ghazi Hamad is a senior Hamas official who serves as kind of an informal spokesperson, and he said in an interview about Sinwar, these were formative years, meaning the years that he spent in an Israeli prison. He developed a leadership personality in every sense of the word. Now, you may know this from many, many news reports. During that time in Israeli prison, he became fluent in Hebrew, took advantage of an online university program, and devoured Israeli news to better understand his enemy, the enemy of Hamas, you and me, Israelis and Jews all over the world. Sinwar once told his supporters they wanted prison to be a grave for us, a mill to grind our will, determination, and bodies. But thank God, he said, with our belief in our cause, we turned the prison into sanctuaries of worship and academies for study. Those last 3 words are very important. And academies for study. Okay, let's go back to Dr. Bitton. So, Dr. Bitton, as I told you, was a dentist in charge of the dental clinic at this prison, but he had also been trained in general medicine. He is an MD. And he was often called upon to assist the other prison doctors, especially when there was a need for as many doctors as possible, or in a difficult case where it wasn't clear, he'd be called in. One fateful day in 2004, there were several colleagues that surrounded this patient, Yahya Sinwar, and Dr. Bitton saw them, and he came over and said, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Sinwar started to describe his symptoms. He would stand and then he would fall. He would drift in and out of consciousness. This is 2004. He had a complaint of very strong pain at the back of his head. And Dr. Bitton was certain that there was something very wrong in Sinwar's brain. And he told the other doctors that he needed to go to the hospital immediately as an emergency patient. He was rushed to Soroka Medical Center. The doctors there did emergency surgery to remove a malignant and aggressive brain tumor that would have been fatal if left untreated. A few days later, Bitton and some other officials from the prison came to visit Sinwar in the hospital, and Sinwar said to them that it is very important that I say to you, Dr. Bitton, that you saved my life, and it's very important that you understand what that means in Islam. He was saying his religion, that Sinwar now owed his life to Dr. Yuval Bitton. Now, before this happened, Sinwar rarely spoke to any Israeli authorities in the prison, but from that point on, 2004, after the surgery, he began meeting regularly with Dr. Bitton. And they were not personal conversations, they were about Hamas. Sinwar knows Quran by heart, and he very calmly laid out his organization's doctrines, the philosophy and the approach of Hamas. Here's how Dr. Bitton described it. Hamas sees the land we live on, meaning we Jews. Hamas sees that land as their holy land. In other words, this is ours, Hamas is saying. You, meaning us, do not have a right to live in this land. It wasn't political, it was religious. Dr. Bitton would ask him, is there no chance then for a two-state solution? Sinwar would say, never. Why not? Dr. Bitton would ask. Sinwar would answer, because this is the land of the Muslims, not for you. I can't sign away this land. Now, it's important to understand that Dr. Bitton was under no illusions about this person he was dealing with. There was a psychological profile that was done of Sinwar. He is cruel. He is cunning, manipulative. He is an authoritative man with the ability to carry crowds, a natural leader. And he's a person who keeps secrets even inside prison amongst the other prisoners. Still, Dr. Bitton said there was a certain transactional honesty in their conversations because Dr. Bitton wanted to better understand the schisms between Hamas and the other Palestinian factions in the prison. He wanted to know who he was dealing with. And Sinwar wanted to know, and he returned to the subject over and over with Dr. Bitton to understand the divisions in Israeli society between rich and poor, Sephardic and Ashkenazi, secular and Orthodox. And that's the subject that he wanted to make sure that he understood. In 2006, after Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, Hamas won an election in Gaza for the leadership of that area. At about that time in 2006, Dr. Bitton decided to evolve into a different role, and he became a prison intelligence officer. And he would say, if we don't understand the motives and roots of our enemy, we will not be able to prevent those organizations from doing what they want to harm us. And when he evolved into this role, 2008, he was quickly drawn into a monumental challenge, because 2 years earlier, if you remember, 2006, that is when Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier, was kidnapped by Hamas, and his captor, one of his captors, was Sinwar's brother. By 2009, there were discussions about an exchange of prisoners for the release of Gilad Shalit. As you know, sometime later, it was over 1,000 prisoners that were released in exchange for this Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. And from inside the prison, Sinwar was helping to manage the negotiations. On October 18th, 2011, I think that's a day that many of us will remember, Dr. Bitton watched as Sinwar and other prisoners boarded a bus for Gaza as part of this release of prisoners. Now, Dr. Bitton had told the prison authorities not to release him. They did not release every single prisoner they had. And Dr. Bitton said that it's not just what Sinwar was prosecuted for and imprisoned for, it's also his ability and his potential. And Dr. Bitton argued that he should not be released, but he was overruled. Now, hours after Sinwar was released from Israeli prison in 2011, he gave an interview on Al-Aqsa TV. And he said the following. Listen carefully to these words, of course, translated into English. "We shall spare no efforts to liberate the rest of our brothers and sisters. We urge the Qassam brigades to kidnap more soldiers to exchange them for the freedom of our loved ones who are still behind bars." And Dr. Bitton said he told us what he was going to do, but apparently we didn't want to listen. Fast forward to this past October 7th. Dr. Bitton has a sister named Yael. His sister has a son named Tamir Adar. This is Dr. Bitton's nephew. Tamir Adar and his family lived in Nir Oz, the kibbutz less than 2 miles from the Gaza border. That morning, the sirens went off, rockets were coming in, terrorists came. Adar told his family to stay in their safe room, and he went to participate in the emergency defense of their area. 4 p.m., Israeli soldiers finally arrived. And by that time, Tamir Adar was nowhere to be found. And his mother, Yael, called her brother, Dr. Bitton, and said, Tamir has disappeared. It would take 3 weeks before Israeli officials could confirm that Adar had been taken hostage along with all the others. Now, Yael, his mother, Dr. Bitton's sister, gave herself over, since that day, has given herself over to the hostages' cause, to attend marches and demonstrations to protest against the government, to pressure the government in striking a deal with Hamas. She wondered whether she should ask her brother to leverage his connections, but decided against this. She said, "What could I tell him? Call Sinwar." Okay, this is very important. It did not escape the attention of Dr. Bitton that the Hamas assault came at a time of deep division in Israel, where Israel, since the January before, had been overwhelmed by protests against the government, right wing against left wing, over judicial reform and other issues. It was precisely the type of schism that Sinwar had spoken of years before at Beersheba, when he said he would attack at a time of internal strife. Notwithstanding Dr. Bitton's previous relationship with Sinwar, he had small hope for his nephew's release, because he understood that for Sinwar, these hostages are a means to an end, to freeing all of the Palestinian prisoners, especially those that were left behind in the release for Gilad Shalit, and also to put the Palestinian cause back on the world stage. And that, we must all agree, he certainly has done. Bitton said, even if Sinwar knew who his nephew was, at the end he looks at us as Jews. Still, it's just incredible. On the day Sinwar was freed, so this is back to 2011, Dr. Bitton and Sinwar had a very short conversation. The last conversation they had, where Sinwar again thanked him for saving his life, back in 2004. And Dr. Bitton says that he believed that Sinwar would feel bound by a kind of code, and that if he was made aware that Hamas held his own nephew, at least he would not allow him to be mistreated. You can interpret that any way that you want. Several weeks after the Hamas attack, in the hope that Sinwar was still an avid follower of Israeli news media, which apparently he is, Dr. Bitton decided to give a television interview. In it, he wanted to be very careful. He only said what we now know, that he had been part of the team that diagnosed Sinwar decades before, and that his nephew was among the hostages. Tragically, it turned out that Tamir Adar, Bitton's nephew, was wounded while defending his kibbutz. He was taken prisoner into Gaza, and he died shortly afterwards. And his body is still being held by Hamas. These days, Dr. Bitton meets regularly with the hostages' families, sharing everything he learned about Sinwar to help them manage expectations. Dr. Bitton said, it's just heartbreaking. Dr. Bitton said, I tell the families not to get their hopes up. In this situation, there is no chance. Dr. Bitton and his sister, Yael, have revisited over and over again that long ago day in the prison infirmary, 2004. And Yael said in an interview that they would try to laugh over the absurdity of it all. She said, on the one hand, my brother saved a life, and on the other, his sister, referring to herself, lost her boy to the same person he saved. She assures him there was nothing else he could have done. She said, these are our values. Yuval never would have acted differently, never, and neither would I. But in the end, we lost our son. Not everyone in Israel sees it that way, and I'm sure many of you do not see it that way. Some time ago, Dr. Bitton and his sister Yael were sitting in a cafe in Eilat, where the surviving residents of Nir Oz, they had been evacuated to Eilat, and they were sitting together outside in a cafe, and a woman, a stranger, approached them. Apparently, she recognized Dr. Bitton from the interview he had given on television. And she said to him, "Why did you save him? Why? Why did you do it?" I'm not certain what the right answer to that is. There is probably more than one true, perhaps inspiring, certainly painful answer. My friends, I wish you a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.